Oh, hello. Sorry, I had to put you in here. The fridge has got a bit too much beer in, so, welcome to your new place for a couple of weeks while I get through the beers. Today, we've got Kyoto Brewing Company, so come on, let's go drink a few beers together, shall we? Hey, welcome to the first part of this two-parter for 3 Beer Thursday for Kyoto Brewing Company. And as you can see, we've got quite an eclectic mix of beers. Must say that before we go off on this video, some of these beers might not be available, mainly due to COVID-19. Kyoto Brewing Company decided to bottle load their beers, hence some of the funky labels. They are pretty cool, I have to say. And this is from one of the sets that I bought about a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to do this in 2 parts. With the first part with their saisons, a table saison, a strong saison, regular saison. Then we've got a couple of sours and one of their regular beers, another saison. So I've got a feeling my stomach might have a few issues with this one, but let's start off with a nice gentle one, the table saison. First up, we have the Kyoto Brewing Table Saison. And I know what you're thinking, Rob, that's not what it says in Japanese. I know it says Little Pleasures, but they kind of changed the name due to this being bottled for COVID-19. It's a 4% Saison, and it uses New Zealand Motueka hops. I've not had this before, but the idea of a table Saison is something that you can just drink and drink and drink, which is never a bad thing. Some saisons you do get a 6.5%, 7%, but straight away this pours out a very light golden body. It's slightly hazy there, I'm guessing that's because it's a little bit cold, but yeah, it smells like a saison. Fruity phenolic hops going on, some yeasty parts as well. That's classic mini saison, I guess. It doesn't smell offensive. It's crisp, it's dry, slightly phenolic from the yeast, not the hops, and a little bit fruity. It is dry. It kind of dries out in the back of the throat, but at 4%, that is a beer that you could easily knock back one after another. It is very refreshing. Slightly stickiness left on the aftertaste, but yeah, that is easily a very drinkable saison that you could just go and go and go. Here we have the Kyoto Saison. I know the label doesn't really tell you much, but it's actually called the Shunakashuto spring version of their saison. This beer is kind of released throughout the year, and it has slightly different additions to it. Now this one is hot using Hallertau and Mittelfruer hops, and it comes in at 6%, and it's got a cool label on there. It's a handmade label that tells you the size of the bottle, 330, if you couldn't guess that. And this is one that I've had before, but usually on draft. This is, as I mentioned, due to the COVID-19, bottled for the first time. And if we compare it to the table saison, Little Pleasures, it's a little bit darker. I mean, it's to be expected, isn't it? I mean, slightly more alcohol, which means slightly more malt's been used. It's still got that fruitiness, phenolic from the yeast, but it's a bit bolder this time around. It's a more kind of classic I guess classic would be the wrong word to use, but the modern day Saison that we think of as Saison kind of does resemble that a bit more. It's a bit more earthy as well in the hops. It's not as citrusy. Really carbonated. Dry, phenolic, kind of estuary as well in the background. But yeah, it's a lot more carbonated in the body, more lively to it, more frothy in the mouth. It is a little bit wheaty. You don't really get that in the nose, but it does leave that phenolic taste in the background. And while it's not as refreshing, it's a bit more sweeter actually as well than the Saison. So it's not as refreshing as the table Saison, but it has more flavour to it. And that's a trade-off you've got to make, I think, with Saisons. You can have them light. I prefer them a bit bolder, mainly because that's what I started drinking was bolder Saisons. But yeah, nice, get some. For the final beer for this first part of the 3 Beer Thursday, we're going back to the Shunakashuto range, probably said that wrong, with the Kyoto Brewing Strong Saison. And as you can see on the label, they've highlighted winter in the bottom right, which means this is the winter version and clocks in at 8%. I'm not going to say much about that. I mean, Strong Saison, 8%. Going to be interesting. This one is brewed using Nelson Sauvin hops. It's the 2019 version of this beer. I'm assuming it's 2019 because winter started in December last year. And it pours out quite surprisingly light. I was expecting something a bit darker for a winter Saison. It's a little bit darker than the spring version, but it's far more phenolic in the nose. Slight grape berry like nose to it. Not as phenolic as I thought it'd be. My image of a strong Saison would be something that's more flavoursome, aromaful perhaps, but this surprisingly isn't that strong compared to the spring version. There's a light phenolic estuary nose to it, nowhere as strong as the 8% would, give off. But the body is much fuller, much richer, far sweeter. There's a slight tang to it, more peachy-like quality to it. That is also a little bit. You can taste the booziness, 8%, but because of the sweetness, I think it brings up the booziness through the beer. It's more sticky as well. It does feel like we're verging on like a light Belgium double-esque level of stickiness to it. Definitely not going to be knocking that back. I mean, the table Saison was 4%, that's 8%. That's probably like a beer you're going to want to sit and sip on, but we know I don't sip beers. Let's look at the first roundup for Kyoto Brewing Company. And we had those 3 beers. We had the table Saison, the spring version of the Shunakashuto, and the winter version. And the reason I chose those is because they went actually 4, 6, 8. And this one, it's not that difficult to decide because they actually feel, even though they're Saisons, they've 3 very distinct representations of what a Saison is. You know, you could have had your classic Saison, Saison de Pont, which I know the guys at Kyoto Brewing Company really like, and that could be your image of a Saison. But I'm of the mind that not always more is best. I like my IPAs bold. I don't always want to taste the alcohol. I do like some restrained phenols, esters in my beer, but when it comes to today's 3-2-1, it's easy. Third, it's a strong Saison. Yeah, it is very rich. It didn't really feel like a Saison to me. It was quite sweet, sticky, and that for me, that's not what a Saison is. The table Saison is number 2. I liked it. I did like it, but it just felt a bit light. It didn't have the balancedness with the malt and the yeast going on. For me, the spring version of the Shunakashuto was exactly what I look for in a Saison. That's exactly what I want in a Saison. Admittedly, you're not going to be drinking that as quick as that, but it is still refreshing, and it is, for me, the best representation of a Saison that I've had from Kyoto Brewing Company. Hope you enjoyed that first part for the Kyoto Brewing 3 Beer Thursday. If you want to see more, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell button to get notifications. If you want to help support us, click on the link below for the Patreon. You can support us with however much you can each month. Got to keep in the cupboard until next time. The beers are going to go back in the fridge because, you know, they need to be kept cold. Take it easy. See you next week.